Hey, it's Trish, and this is where Recovering the Pieces begins. For years ago, on January 18th, 2022, I opened the results of my ancestry DNA test. I grew up not really knowing my father. I'd never met him. The name I was given came from my mother's ex-husband at the time, someone I'd never met either. But when those results came back, something didn't add up. My mother's ex-husband's last name? It wasn't there. Not in the close matches, not in the extended family, nowhere. But then, another name started showing up. Again and again, across the ancestry matches. And something in me just knew, this was my father's family. Just like that, I had a last name I'd never known before. Two matches stood out, close, undeniable. I was in shock. Instead of sitting with it, I reacted. I reached out to one of them and wrote, "I think you might be my cousin." While I waited, I started digging. I found a family, 8 boys and 1 girl, and thought, my father has to be one of those sons. I thought that because of their ages. But then she wrote back, "I'm not your cousin. I'm your sister." And just like that, everything shifted. My father wasn't one of the boys. It was their father. A man I had never even heard of. And when you're a child, growing up in a house without a father, you ask those questions. Who is he? Did he love me? Even know I existed? What about him? My mother always had answers. She was an incredible storyteller. But her stories weren't whole truths, they were fragments, stitched together from other lives, other men, other versions of the past. Bits and pieces she spun like thread, weaving something that felt real enough to hold on to. There were 3 of us children in that house. And each of us had a different father. Later, when I reached out to this stranger, the woman who told me she was my sister, I don't think I found the right words. She left her phone number, but I was overwhelmed, so instead of calling, I went searching. I found them on Facebook, an entire family, so many faces, more than I could take in at once. I found a picture of him and put it up on my Facebook page. It found them. That night, like every night, I went out around 10 o'clock to feed the black cat colony I'd been caring for. And out there, in the dark, my phone rang. It was one of the men, someone who would turn out to be my brother. He started asking questions. Where was I? How did this happen? And little by little, the truth began to spill out. I was an in-between story. An affair between endings. My mother was going through a divorce, and his wife had left him. He was looking for her when their paths crossed. And somewhere in that moment, they made me. And as I would later learn, I wasn't the only one. But that's a story for another time. I had spent my entire life trying to understand who I was, where I belonged, in my family and in the world. And suddenly, a door opened I could never have imagined. Because if I had lived in any other time, before DNA, I might have never known at all. In this podcast, I won't be sharing my father's name or the specific details I uncovered. He has a large family, and they don't deserve that kind of intrusion. And truthfully, much of what I've learned has come through stories, passed down by others who, like me, are older now and still shaped by their own childhoods. Over time, those stories have taken on a life of their own, like Appalachian folklore, told and retold, with only pieces that can be confirmed. But that's not the heart of this podcast. This is about my journey, about healing. It's about what it's meant to face the past, to piece together what was lost, and to try to heal from it. I'm sharing this because I've learned, through recovery, that when we tell our stories, our experience, our strength, and our hope, it helps other people. It reminds us that we're not alone. And more importantly, it shows us that healing, real emotional recovery, is possible. Because my father, and everything about him, was completely foreign to me, I spent those first few weeks trying to make connections, gathering pieces, looking for anything that made sense. I wasn't new to this kind of unraveling. I'm an older woman, and I had already gone through something similar on my mother's side of the family, just before I got sober. My mother had 4 other children she lost during her divorce from the man she always said was my father. When she became pregnant with me, her 5th, she left Michigan and moved to Iowa, where I was born. Within my first 2 years, we moved again, this time to Washington State, so she could marry a man she'd met through a Lonely Hearts ad, the old-school version of a dating app. Of course, because of her own wounds, her new marriage did not last but added more damage to a woman already harmed by her own childhood. She would pass on generational wounds. I was raised almost entirely on the West Coast. Almost, because when I was 5, we spent a few months back in Michigan with my grandmother before returning to Oregon. I grew up in Oregon, Washington, and California. Even spent a summer in Nevada. I left home at 17, went to child welfare with my smaller sister. I told our story and we never went home to see my mother again. I never lived with my 2 younger siblings again. My mother was gone, left the state with the youngest child in a day. In my 17-year-old brain, I felt guilty, so I wanted to leave her with my littlest sibling, so she wasn't alone. My mother's first set of 4 children, I met only one. At 32, they made contact by phone with me. She discovered there were more children and came looking. I went 3 times to Florida to see her, my half-sister. One of them passed away young. The others felt overwhelming to me, like stepping into lives that were connected to mine, but never really mine. And yet, at that time it became a turning point for me. Because I wasn't living a life, at least one I felt proud of. And something about facing that history shifted something in me. It became part of what pushed me to finally get sober from alcohol. Because I wasn't really living a life, I was living as an alcoholic, half-present, without much hope. But something shifted when I realized I had a family, that they existed. Facing that history, however complicated it was, stirred something in me. It became part of what pushed me to get sober. And getting sober changed everything. That was more than 30 years ago now. Since then, there's been a lot of work, therapy, hard truths, and steady support from communities like AA, Al-Anon. Piece by piece, I've built a life. Not all at once, but gradually, putting it together in a way that finally feels whole. I still didn't have the answers. Doing a 4th step on childhood was filled with holes. Information I didn't know, damage I didn't know how to define. I did not have words for feelings, behavior, or responses to my childhood or even my life as an adult. Over time, when you work on yourself long enough, it becomes muscle memory. As issues come up, your training goes into figuring it out, working it out, and healing. In AA, I have heard first you work the program, then the program works you. Finding my father was the last big piece and allowed me to finally let go of the past. Well, as much as you can, bits over time. It allowed me to accept it. I think that is a better way to describe it. Each Monday I will put out a new podcast, and would love if you shared your stories, as eventually I would love to have you tell them. You are not alone, there is healing and recovery.